There is a catastrophic gap between national pledges to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and the actions needed to cap global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, the UN's environment chief warned Tuesday, days ahead of global climate talks in Bonn. Even if fulfilled, these pledges inscribed along with the 2°C target in the 2015 Paris Climate Pact would see the world heat up 3°C 5.6°F, unleashing deadly heat waves, superstorms and rising seas, UN Environment said in its annual emissions gap report, the bleakest ever. Record-setting extreme weather in 2017 including monsoon flooding, raging fires and deadly hurricanes likely bears the fingerprint of global warming, it noted. 1 year after the Paris Agreement entered into force, we still find ourselves in a situation where we are not doing nearly enough to save hundreds of millions of people from a miserable future, said Eric Solheim, head of the UN agency. Governments, the private sector and civil society must bridge this catastrophic climate gap. Compiled by more than 200 climate scientists and experts, the annual, 100-page analysis tracks progress toward the Paris goal of checking the rise in global temperatures at well below 2°C, with many poor nations already feeling the sting of a planet out of kilter with only 1 degree of warming. The treaty also vowed to explore the feasibility of holding the line at 1.5°C. Current commitments for slashing pollution take us only a third of the way toward the 2°C target, and would eat up 80% of humanity's carbon budget, the amount of CO2 we can spew into the atmosphere without crossing that threshold by 2030, the report said. It doesn't help that the United States, the world's second-largest emitter, has abandoned its greenhouse gas goals under Donald Trump. Momentum is clearly faltering, said Edgar Gutierrez Espeleta, Costa Rica's environment minister and president of the current UN Environment Assembly. We face a stark choice: up our ambition, or suffer the consequences. If the gap is not closed by 2030, the report said, it is extremely unlikely that the goal of holding global warming to well below 2°C can still be reached. To stay on the 2°C track, humanity must cut its emissions to about 42 billion tons of CO2 or its equivalent by 2030 from last year's 52 billion tons. But even with carbon-cutting pledges from more than 190 nations, carbon pollution in 2030 is set to rise to 53 billion tons. Without them, emissions shoot up to 60 billion tons. Under the UN climate talks, countries will not revisit their pledges until 2020, the last opportunity to close the 2030 emissions gap, the report said. Source: AFP.